everybody. Hey, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a minute. If you guys would please take your seats. It's very exciting. Ooh, it's getting quiet out there. I can hear it. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started here very shortly. Thank you.
Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Welcome, and thank you for coming to our 6th annual TEDxBellarmineU event. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm going to go over some housekeeping with you before we begin. We have 6 exits in this theater. The exits to your right are only for emergencies. If you exit through them, you won't be able to re-enter. So, during intermission, please use the exits to your left so that you can come back in. On that note, we will be having a 15-minute intermission and entering the theater until that time. Lastly, please turn off all of your cell phones and electronic devices, and no photography allowed. We have some wonderful photographers here to do that for you. Now, please welcome our MCs, Abby and Jacob.
Here we go. Usually on that side. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Hi. If you couldn't tell, this is Jacob, and I'm Abby. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Elizabeth, our new MC in training. We should give her a round of applause. She's a rock star.
That's her first time.
Yes, that was her first time doing that. You can't tell. It's amazing. All right. Well, thank you all again for coming tonight. Our theme for tonight's TEDx is community resilience. Because to us, nothing shapes a community more than hardships that people face and overcome together. And today, we will be bringing together 7 different stories of community strength, determination, and innovation in the face of hardship. Thank you. Thank you.
And if you guys have been to one of our events before, you know that Abby and I like to try to keep a theme throughout. So what we're going to be talking about is community resilience. And we're going to start with community. That they are individually at the end of the show. But we wanted to highlight them now because they are a part of our community, our TED community, our local community that help us perform this show every single year.
Yes, we appreciate them. Let's give an applause for our sponsors. Yes. Yes, and we also want to appreciate the other supporters that come with this event, our lovely audience members, along with our many sponsors, which represent our theme of community, which obviously, but it's very important. You all give these speakers a community and a platform to be able to speak and tell their stories, which is beautiful. So thank you all for being here tonight and being here to listen to these stories and giving us money. We kind of appreciate that. That also kind of supports us. So thank you. And
thank
so
you,
with
Abby.
that, yes,
yeah.
Of course. Thank
awesome.
you all.
So let's get started. Our first speaker tonight is Stephen Michael Carr. Above anything else, Stephen Michael Carr is a storyteller. So I want you guys to be really excited for that. He's having told stories all over the city with events like We Still Like You and USA Today's Storyteller Project. Stephen Michael Carr is the founder of SMC Story Coaching. He also produces 2 local storytelling shows, Tales from a Jukebox and Come Out Lou. So please welcome our first speaker, Stephen Michael Carr.
Hi, everybody. If you all could just laugh at my jokes, that would be great, okay? Awesome. Let's see. That's me. If you want to change the world, tell the world your story. If you want the world to change you, listen to another person's story. I have been telling stories ever since I could talk. I grew up in an only child household, so there were always adults around who were more than willing to listen to whatever cute and often ridiculous things I had to say. My husband, David, would argue that that still holds true to this day, and that is why I am standing on this little red dot right now. I got into storytelling through the nonprofit The Moth, if you've ever heard of that, and they hold these things called story slams, where you get on stage and you have 5 minutes to tell a story about your life based on whatever the theme of the evening is. My first story, I got on stage and I talked about how when David and I first got together, my family would often refer to him as my friend whenever we were out in public, and how that made me feel. After I left the stage, a woman came up to me and told me that hearing my story helped her understand her daughter better. And I thought, I made a human connection. That's great. But the thing is it happened again the next time I told a story. This time, I was on stage talking about mine and David's first rundown apartment together, complete with cockroaches and the toothless exhibitionist cowboy neighbor next door. Yeah, take all the time you need. And whenever I got off of the stage from that, a couple came up to me and told me that in their early 20s, they had lived at the exact same apartment complex. And so the next thing I knew, we were spending the rest of the evening swapping stories about living on Nightingale Road. And I had made another human connection. And soon I realized that I wasn't just telling stories for fun anymore. I was telling them to make those human connections, to build community, to be embedded in all these different circles in Louisville. So I was invited to tell a story at the Festival of Faiths about mine and David's long journey to being the first gay couple to get married at our church. And in that story, I talked about what it is like to be a queer person attending weddings of your friends and families in non-affirming spaces, and how there's this expectation that you're allowed to be there, but you should sit down during the slow songs, and you shouldn't, hold hands or anything, because you don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, do you? And how that is like the emotional roller coaster that queer people often go through whenever they attend weddings in these kinds of spaces. And after the show was over, a man came up to me and asked me if he could give me a hug, because in all of his years of considering himself an ally, he had never thought about that experience before. So I was blessed and highly favored, as they say. I was telling stories all over the city, making all kinds of new friends, all kinds of community connections, and then the pandemic happened. And all of those relationships that I had built, all of my friends, all of my family, complex human beings were reduced to pixels on a screen. And the thing about pixels on the screen is that they're a lot easier to argue with, to denounce, and to block than people are. And this was compounded even further by the spring of 2020. Louisville went through a long overdue racial reckoning with the murder of Breonna Taylor, and a bunch of people, myself and David included, took to the streets, and we marched in protest. Now, I have several police officers in my family, so you can imagine how contentious some of the conversations that we had on the internet were. For a brief period of time, my own mother blocked me on Facebook, but don't worry, we're fine now. Love you, Mom. And the thing about pixels, right, is that they're a lot easier to get rid of than people. And so pretty soon I find myself living online during the pandemic in a silo, an echo chamber. And the thing about those silos is that when you're in them long enough, you begin to think that your personal life experience and your lived experience is a universal experience, that everyone has the same experiences as you, that everyone thinks and comes from the same space that you come from. And so whenever you live in that silo long enough and you begin to bump up against people who have different perspectives than you, it's really easy then to label them as other, as wrong, maybe even bad. And if we're not careful, when we label people that way, we can become the very bullies that we often claim to stand against. So, how do I talk with my uncle who thinks that me being gay is living in addiction? How do I talk with my neighbor whose skin is darker than mine and for whom I often represent and sometimes unconsciously participate in their oppression? What about the ones who light menorahs or the ones that pray to Mecca 5 times a day? What about my neighbor who is literally a voodoo priestess? No, really, she's a voodoo priestess. And so we're all so different. You know, how can we even begin to think about finding common ground and common humanity? And this is not meant to be a definitive, we are the world kind of answer. But nevertheless, my answer is this. You start by telling your story. And you follow that up by listening to other people's stories. You see, there is a neuroscientist named Paul Zak from Claremont University who did a series of studies about the way the brain reacts to being told stories that follow the universal story structure that you see behind me here. You might recognize this from your 7th grade language arts class many years ago, right? And the thing is whenever we are told stories that follow this structure, our brain produces 2 chemicals, cortisol and oxytocin. Cortisol is the danger chemical. It helps us pay attention to the stimuli that is around us to keep us safe. And oxytocin is known as the bonding chemical. It is the chemical that helps us feel connection between each other. And so when we hear stories, our brains emit oxytocin, and the more oxytocin the brain emits, the more likely we are to listen and believe and feel a connection to the person who is telling us about their lived experience. And so, in other words, whenever I was on stage talking about being a queer person in church spaces, that man who wanted to give me a hug, my story literally changed his brain on a biochemical level. This is why it's so important for us to have because the sheer swiftness with which the United States changed its stance in the early 2000s on gay rights owes everything to the brave people who came forward and shared their stories with their friends and family. And for people who didn't think that they knew any queer people, they got to see those stories played out on television, namely through the TV show Will and Grace. That show was so influential in that flip that sociologically they refer to that flip as the Will and Grace effect. So when we tell each other stories about our differences, we find our common humanity. In my spare time, I work with nonprofits, and I help them tell their stories, usually for fundraising purposes. And I'll never forget the first person that I supported to tell their story for that reason. He was the board chair of a local nonprofit that helps end cycles of poverty through homeownership. And the folks had asked him to get up in front of 150 plus people at their annual fundraising breakfast to tell his story about how he felt connected to this kind of work. He was terrified. He did not want to do this. He didn't think that anyone would care about what he had to say. And yet, with a little love and support and, maybe a little shoving, he took to the stage that morning to tell his story. And that's when he told this room of 150 or so people that he, an older black man in his late 60s, grew up as a sharecropper on a plantation in Bellarmine, Mississippi, with 0 renters' rights. And his life's goal was to leave the plantation and to own his own home. And when he did that as a young man, his new goal began to be to return to that plantation and to help his brothers and his sisters and his mom and his dad to leave the plantation as well. I can still hear the tremble in his voice when he told he was able to pay the down payment on his father's first home. And whenever he was finished, tears were streaming down his face, because for him, he saw the work this organization was doing as an extension of his life's mission, which was to help families leave the plantation. And when he was finished, the entire crowd erupted, and they stood up and they clapped for 3 minutes solid, and that breakfast raised 70% more money compared to the previous year. You see, not only do we see each other when we tell our stories, we often literally find ourselves when we tell our stories. When we tell each other stories, we realize just how different we all are and how beautiful that difference is, that it makes life magical. And when we tell each other stories, we realize that as different as we all are, we really aren't that different at all. And so, I close today by asking you, do you want to have an impact in your community? Do you want to change your little part of the world? Tell your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is Jen Spalding. Jen Spalding helps communities, families, and organizations understand the challenges that children face with sensory issues. She has a master's in education and educational counseling from the University of Louisville. Please welcome Jen Spalding.
Thank you. Lily has sensory issues, the speech teacher gently told me. stunned, I immediately started thinking about the 5 senses I taught my students over the years. And what would that mean for our Lily, our family, and our future? So I asked the speech teacher questions, and she was answering the questions, but it didn't make any sense to me. I still didn't understand. And it wasn't connecting for me until later on that month at church. We were getting ready to leave when Lily said, "No, I want to go that way." So I was trying to explain to a 3-year-old why my way was better than her way. Lily let down, and so something said, "Jen, look at her way versus your way." So I looked at her way, nothing was there. I looked at my way, and there were people shoulder to shoulder. The lights were bright. It was noisy. And then it clicked for me that she was having a sensory overload. It was sensory issues. And I looked at her and I said, "We'll go your way." And she was just so happy, skipped to the door, and all life was great for her then. So I decided that I needed to educate myself on sensory issues. So I, of course, went online. I talked to my friends, family, coworkers, and I learned that one of my coworkers had a son that had sensory processing disorder, which is an even more extreme version of sensory issues. And and so I was like, okay, so what are they? And then I learned that sensory issues are when people are oversensitive or undersensitive to the stimuli in their environment. So you can be, if you're oversensitive oversensitive, it's think of your 5 senses. You know, your sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. And then we have 3 hidden senses. Of course, we had all 3 of those. So one is proprioception, which has to do with body awareness and muscle memory. Vestibular, which has to do with balance. And interoception, which is how you're feeling on the inside, knowing your emotions and how you're feeling on the inside and how your body works. So if you're oversensitive to a certain sense, then I want you to think about the nails on the chalkboard. That sound bothers a lot of people. Or the tag in the back of your shirt. Are certain foods that you eat that the texture's not quite right, or crowds. All of those have to do with being oversensitive to sensory issues. And when you're oversensitive, we call that avoiders, because those people that are oversensitive are doing everything they can to avoid anything that's displeasurable. And then also, the opposite of that are seekers. And what seekers do, they are undersensitive, so they're seeking that sense. So I'm going to talk about the vestibular sensory issue. Vestibular, remember, is for balance. So if they are undersensitive, they're the ones that are jumping out of the airplanes. They're going the scariest rides, and they're like thrill seekers, like Evel Knievel. And so they want to do all those things to help balance out their bodies. And so once I learned all of this great information, I said, I'm going to use this in my classroom because I want to help my students to know their bodies, themselves better, and then they can become better learners, they can be better friends, and we'll function so much better. So I included brain gym in my class. We did flexible seating, morning meetings. We did a lot of things to help them. And at home, what I did with my daughter, I took pictures, but not with the flash because she was oversensitive to the flash. I gave her deep pressure massages when she was upset about different things. I kept a schedule and a routine. I let her know what we were doing ahead of time. She wore earphones, and I did several other things to help my daughter to adjust to these sensory issues. And so around 6 years ago, I had the class, okay? Nothing was working like I thought it would work. I used all the tricks in my teacher bag. And I said, I was looking a little bit like her. And I was like, I prayed and I was led to retire and to write books about sensory issues. So all of my books are about my daughter, our daughter, and her sensory issues. And I wrote the books that I would have liked to have read when I was going through what I did with my child. And so the books show the parents that, hey, we're not alone. We're not alone in this chaos. And then the children, it helps them to not feel alone either, because there's someone that's like them. She doesn't like picture taking like me, or she doesn't like hugs and kisses like me, and it's okay. And so if you have a child that is struggling behaviorally, you might want to build a community of friends, family, supporters, a pediatrician. And when you go to the pediatrician, he or she may suggest that you have your child evaluated. And I want to encourage you, I had my own child evaluated. Don't be afraid of the evaluation, because the more you know, the more you can help your child. And it's been a great tool for us. I'm glad that we did it. You want to be your child's number one advocate, because your child's going to need you. Because sometimes if there is a diagnosis, just because you have sensory issues doesn't mean it rises to a diagnosis. But if there is a diagnosis, they're going to need you for those spark meetings and talking to teachers. They're going to need someone that's on their side that gets them and understands them. And so just because basically what we want to do, that's my Lily, we want our children to be self-aware, and once they learn about sensory issues and what those triggers are, then it'll help them to self-regulate and help them to be ready for the world. And when we are raising our children, we're raising them to be awesome people, which I'm sure your children are awesome. But in addition, we want them to be great citizens. We want them to be wonderful spouses and partners to someone in life. So when we do that, we are helping to build resilience in our community, within our children and within our community. And we are a village, and together we're a community, and we are resilient. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Our next speaker is Michael Kopp. Michael Kopp is assistant professor at Bellarmine University of Art and the director of the Social Practice Lab. Michael analyzes the politics and processes of HIV transmission through contemporary queer and social practice art, and he has shared his research around the world. Please welcome Michael Kopp.
Good evening. The intersection of AIDS activism and U.S. queer politics is a history of resilience. It's important to recall this history because whoever tells the history of a movement shapes it as well. What cannot be forgotten is the truth that upon the emergence of AIDS in America, gay and bisexual men were viewed by their government as morally deviant and experienced severe social rejection. What cannot be forgotten is the truth that nearly an entire generation of gay and bisexual men were lost to a disease and were not able to pass down their culture or their life lessons to generations that would follow. If an individual or a community cannot situate itself accurately and truthfully within the timeline of history, past experiences are doomed to repeat themselves. I was born in 1990. That's 10 years after the first case of AIDS was diagnosed in San Francisco and after 120,000 Americans had died from AIDS-related complications. In 2016, at the age of 26, I was diagnosed as living with HIV. I was shocked. This was my first experience with the sexual health care system. I had learned about HIV, albeit briefly, in a high school health class, but my understanding was that HIV was not something that happened anymore, and that I certainly was not at risk of contracting the virus. As a young gay man living in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, that could not have been and could not be further from the truth. For the sake of this conversation, we're going to define and divide. One encompasses the early years of the crisis, years 1980 to roughly 1986, and is characterized by gay and lesbian communities' agency to self-organize to provide emergency health care, social support services, and dignified end-of-life care for those dying from AIDS-related complications. These were all services that were actively denied by a government and a ruling social class that claimed moral superiority over the afflicted. Wave 2 is characterized by civil disobedience, queer militancy, and various forms of street theater. Facing mounting death rates and brazen persecution from every branch of government, the political affect at this time shifted and gave way to new political possibilities and new forms of activism. In 1987, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, better known as ACT UP, was founded in response to this shifting political landscape. From 87 to 93, ACT UP engaged in various forms of direct action street protests and launched chapters in major cities across the US. While the organization's tactics were controversial and confrontational, they galvanized public support as they demanded political and social change. So in 1990, Congress finally passed a series of legislation that focused on the health and social equity of those living with HIV, and substantially funded state governments to invest in public health measures to combat the crisis. These long-fought-for policies shifted power from grassroots organizations to the multi-billion-dollar AIDS service industry that we have today. Since this ongoing investment from Congress, scientific and technological advancements in the prevention and treatment of HIV have been mind-blowing. We are currently in an era of HIV neutrality, which means that individuals living with HIV can no longer pass the disease on to others, and people who are not living with HIV can take medication to prevent contracting the virus. The Ending the HIV Epidemic is a federal health initiative that was launched in 2019 by the US government, with the goal to eliminate new HIV cases in the US by 2030. What a wildly inspirational initiative that literally everyone should support and get behind. However, legislation is often behind the ball when it comes to scientific and technological breakthroughs, and we only need to look at our public health policies at the state and local level to see that this initiative is dead on arrival. Throughout the past 2 decades, 50% of all HIV outbreaks in the US have occurred in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. From 2020 to 2022, Kentucky saw the highest rates of HIV transmission it's ever recorded in state history. This is a combination of poor public health policy as well as poor public health preparedness. Until this past year, 2023, it was a Class C felony to hold, distribute, market, sell, or use any HIV self-test kit in the Commonwealth. This was a consumer protection law put on the books in 1990, 34 years ago when I was born. To put this in further perspective, during the COVID pandemic, when in-person HIV testing and harm reduction programs were put on operational hold to maintain COVID regulations, Kentucky legislation actively criminalized the only viable HIV testing option for at-risk communities. And we have since seen the largest increase in HIV transmission in our state's history. Luckily, this and a handful of other HIV-specific criminalization laws were modernized in this past legislative session with the passage of House Bill 349, a resilient lobbying effort spearheaded by the Kentucky chapter of the HIV is Not a Crime Coalition. To conclude, when the truth of history is accurately portrayed, we can situate ourselves in our experiences in the timeline and learn from our past. Despite policy and social setbacks, the resilience of individuals and communities plagued by HIV and AIDS over the past 40 years has created the system and infrastructure for the present-day AIDS service industry, which is more effective than it has ever been. The history of AIDS activism is a history of resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is Zoe Parker, who will actually be joined on stage by Lucian Parker on the fiddle and Brandon Preece on the guitar. Zoe promises everything she's learned from her grandfather, and she's thankful for him every single day. She's been playing bluegrass music since the age of 7 and has been practicing her skills on the fiddle ever since. Please give a round of applause for Zoe Parker.
Bluegrass has roots in English, Irish, and Scottish music. This style of music found its way to the Appalachian Mountains and to this day can be heard around campfires and on front porches all around. Even in small cities like Frankfort, Kentucky, you can find bluegrass music alive in little coffee shops on Thursday nights. Instruments like the banjo, guitar, fiddle, and bass are just a few instruments that work together with their unique sounds to make up bluegrass music. Today we brought with us a banjo, guitar, and fiddle. I'll be playing the banjo, which actually originated in West Africa. We'll be playing 2 songs for you today. The first song we'll be playing is called Old Joe Clark. This is a ballad that was written in the early 1900s about a man who was killed over land. Old Joe Clark has an eccentric background and is well known for its unique verses. The second song we'll be playing for you today is called I'll Fly Away, which many of you might already know. This is a traditional church song and is easily recognizable in the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? We hope that today you develop a love for our favorite genre and feel the resilience in bluegrass music of generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you to our sponsors, Right Mind Growth Consulting and Twin Spires Remodeling. We are now going to pause for a 15-minute intermission. Please be sure you're back in your seats by the end of intermission because the doors will need to be shut once the talks start again. Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, welcome back.
Thanks for clapping. That's really nice.
Thank you.
That's
I feel
really nice.
honored. Aw, thank you.
We hear, this is not on the screen, but we hear there's baby goats.
Are there baby
here
goats out there?
From Vaughn, from last year. Is Vaughn here?
Yeah,
That's-
there are baby goats.
There
I
are
heard.
baby goats.
I
So
I
that's
haven't been
really
able to see the
exciting.
baby goats. I'm really jealous. And also cupcakes and
Yeah.
cookies, I think, were brought out. Did anyone get cupcakes and cookies? Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
good. I hope they were good.
We just
Thank
sit
you.
back there in the dark the whole
Yeah,
time.
literally.
So
We don't know what's
really
going
don't know
on.
what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're glad to hear you all are having
Yeah.
a good time. Yes.
So we talked about community, right? Talked about the community of TED. Now we're going to talk about the resilience of TED, right? So this event for us has been going on for 6 years. For TED, it's been going on for around 40.
I know.
So it's a very resilient event. When we started this event, when I was either still in undergrad or just out of undergrad, we had like 4 or 5 volunteers. We did it over there in the black box. Lucas here on the computer was like huddled under a little curtain because we didn't have any other room for that. And we had local Bellarmine speakers. It was an awesome event. But what it's grown into now with all you guys is absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much
Yes.
for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And where I said we had like, 5 or 6 volunteers, you can look out there. We had like 30 or 40 people out there.
So cool.
I don't know where they came from, but they all got TED shirts on.
Yeah, they all have t-shirts on.
And
They
it's
got
really
t-shirts.
exciting. So so thank you to our volunteers too, but we are a
Yes.
resilient event.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're also very resilient. I need to give us some more credit because the year I joined, I definitely got to witness our resilience because I came the year that the pandemic was in full swing. Yes, 2020. I know. Yeah, Angela Miller emailed me and just like, "You're very organized. I think you should join our team." It's like, "Thank you. That's
That's
an honor."
not why I joined the team.
It's okay. It's
Yeah,
all right. We're glad
yeah.
you're here. Yes, it was completely virtual. Just family of the speakers were in the audience. It was just streamed live like it is now, but we didn't have a live audience. So coming back that next year was just incredible to see that live audience again, to see that we'd gotten through that one strange virtual year. So again, if that's not resilience, I don't know what is.
I agree.
Within TED. So
Yeah.
it's so great to see a live audience again. We're so thankful for you all. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
But yes.
I'm just waiting for our
Oh
thing
yeah,
here.
yeah. Waiting for
Awesome.
that. Yeah. We have
So
these.
our next speaker. Clapping for Abby. That was awesome. She was dancing backstage, and I was like, you should just dance off. I was like, you have to dance off. So that was great. Anyway, our next speaker is Jim Loring. Jim is an award-winning humanitarian, photographer. He teaches photography as well, does photography coaching, and he's an educator. Jim has completed more than 70 international assignments and worked for numerous aid organizations. Please welcome to the stage, Jim Loring.
So, I once photographed this amazing school in Ethiopia. It was back in the days of film, and we drove from Addis Ababa 5 hours to the end of the road, hiked for another 5 deep into the Meta Robi Valley, way off the tourist track. You have to be really tough to live in this place. Then, on the return journey, long dirt roads, bustling towns, and then the long shadow of the tarp covering our bags that should have been roped down, flapping in the wind, and the sudden realization, where's my bag? I had the driver stop. I still can't quite believe it. Even now, my bag with 60 rolls of film had fallen off the truck. A 10-day assignment. It was such an incredible experience. So many stories of these incredible people. We were photographing education programs that were charting the way out of poverty. I told myself, don't panic before it happens. We turned around, retraced our steps, but the bag was gone. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, taking stock. Should I go back into the valley? What chance did I have to regain all that was lost? But there came a point where I had to stop looking at the problem. I was surrounded by people who knew how to get back up, and it was now my turn. I still had my camera, 13 rolls of film, 2 days to go back, I made the decision. That's where it always begins. I would hike back into the valley without the team, without an armed guard, but with fresh eyes. That night, I counted frames for how many shots I could take with 13 rolls of film. I figured I had 12 to photograph the school where Hannah and her brother Abraham were dreaming of one day becoming a teacher, a doctor. 7 frames to photograph a family who were so poor they had their children work the fields, even though the school was free. Teachers donating time, everyone working together. As a father, I can only imagine how hard their life had become. At the time, the family were living on maybe 25 cents a day. It's not the first time I've been to Ethiopia. Not everyone makes it. Daegu had been lying on the ground on a mat for 2 weeks. It was a famine, another famine, and the food was gone. To make the picture, I placed my camera on a low wooden stool close to the ground, and I knelt in the dirt. And from there, I understood. As I left, the partner pulled me to one side and said, "Jim, the people have been watching you, and they want to say thank you for suffering with us." My immediate reaction was to write it off. But that statement has helped me stay the course. 70 assignments all over the world, a global perspective that allows us to see from multiple vantage points, and that's what we need to truly understand our place in the world. As a photography coach, one of my first tips is to see what you're not looking at and to look into the 4 corners of the frame. It's a pretty good tip. It's so simple, but it helps us to see everything. Our eyes are not designed for this. Direct vision, our sharpest focus, represents just 3 degrees of what we see. We have great peripheral vision, up to 100 degrees, where we can detect movement, but we move our eyes to see sharp focus. Right now, I suspect most of you are looking straight at me, but it takes eye movement to see the 4 corners of the room. For the photographer, it's the same. We move our eyes to see the 4 corners of the frame, and it goes beyond what we see with our eyes. The photographer, Yusuf Karsh, put it like this. He said, "The heart and mind are the true lens of the camera." To see what you're not looking at begins with asking questions, an internal dialogue that I answer with my camera. I ask myself, what is life like for the children, and take pictures to illustrate the answer. What is the measure of success? What is the one thing that dominates in the lives of these people? For those in much of Africa, it might be the fact that water is 3 miles walk from where you live. For those who live in a war zone, it might be the fact that nowhere is safe. And where there is strict control of ideas, that there is limited access to education, art, music. On assignment, to see what you're not looking at demands that you see both the problem and the solution. Photograph both. In 2019, I photographed the Afghanistan National Institute of Music in Kabul, just 3 years before the Taliban regained control. In a country starved of music, the school was the answer. Bustling with creative energy, it had been called the happiest place in Afghanistan. And what was unheard of for Afghanistan, 30% of their students were young women. I asked one student, "Why is music so important?" She said, "The people hear the music and remember who they are." I returned to Ethiopia 18 months after my film was lost, to a different community, although I did get to see some of the kids again. And once again, the people were working together. Actually, I saw Hannah and Abraham still wearing the same shirt. Once again, the people were working together, hundreds building terraces to protect from land erosion. Old men, children, parents, pickaxes, breaking new ground. They were also told it's not possible to have a school because there was no road. And so, in less than a year, by hand, they built their own road. 28 kilometers. Because for those trapped in poverty, to find a way and see beyond the problem is a rule for life. And it's only when we see with heart and mind that we truly understand. At a time when the world is split, seemingly divided at every level, we need this kind of heart, mind, insight, empathy more than ever. The ability to get down in the dirt and see things as they truly are. It's what makes photographers the real truth tellers of our time. It's what makes photography such a powerful tool for change, to help us to recalibrate our moral compass, understand better our place in the world. But for the photographer to see what you're not looking at requires one more step. We need to look inward, into our own soul, because the answer to the next question can only be found there. It's true for all of us. What body of work will you create with your life? We all need the good that you can bring. And if photography is something you love, the images that are yet to come. Next time you're taking a picture, look into the four corners of the frame and beyond the frame, because to see like a photographer goes beyond what you see with your eyes. It's about what you see with your heart and mind. That is what it takes to truly understand another's point of view. And what better inspiration than to see those who time and again get back up and work together for the good of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Our next speaker is Dawana Hatter. Dawana has spent 17 years in the nonprofit sector and is currently pursuing a doctorate in philosophy and educational science from the University of Kentucky. She uses her life experiences as testimonials to show that anybody can become who they want to be. Please welcome Dawana Hatter.
Oh, they spelled my name wrong. 22 blocks long, 5 blocks wide, with boundaries spanning 1.4 square miles, extending from 9th Street to 31st Street, and sitting between Broadway and Market. It's safe to say that the Russell neighborhood, one of the 9 neighborhoods that make up West Louisville, Kentucky, is the heart of the city of Louisville. It carries a rich history and a bright future, as it was where the world's greatest boxer, Muhammad Ali, attended high school, and the birthplace of many greats, including Albert E. Mazik, an educator and civil rights activist who led the fight to open the first full-service library for African Americans in the country, and Lyman T. Johnson, who became the first African American to gain admission to the University of Kentucky, whose footsteps I followed in as I currently pursue a PhD at the same institution. Today, I stand before you with a profound sense of pride and gratitude as I reflect on the unwavering spirit of the Russell community. Knowing what Russell has survived and watching this community rise above its previous glory has been a joy to watch, especially as a former resident of this neighborhood. I remember growing up in a tight-knit ecosystem of love and resource, where knowing your neighbor was still appreciated, when the playground was full of laughter, and when the streets were sometimes filled with deep sorrow after mourning many losses to gun violence. But even with all of that, no one could tell me that anything was wrong about growing up in the original Beecher Terrace public housing complex, The world was my oyster, and learning how to navigate those moments became the masterclass for life as I would know it. Gaining its name in 1926 after a prominent African American educator, Harvey C. Russell Sr., the Russell neighborhood began its formation as early as the 1830s, when free blacks began buying property west of 9th Street and continued moving west of 21st Street after World War I. In its prime, the Russell neighborhood was affectionately known as the Harlem of Louisville. It was predominantly black by the 1930s and includes many Victorian mansions, antebellum churches, the Western Branch Library, businesses, and historic schools. By the 1940s, the Russell neighborhood was a mecca for black entrepreneurs, as the neighborhood was full of vibrant businesses, including African American restaurants and theaters. Nightclubs lined the streets, and big-name performers at a few of the popular spots, including the Top Hat Club, Charlie Moore's, the Idle Hour, and the world-renowned Joe's Palm Room. Living in Russell was beneficial for everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. And people were flocking to purchase a home within this community. Unfortunately, the Russell neighborhood began decline after World War II and intensified because of misguided urban renewal efforts in the 1960s that demolished commercial area along Walnut Street, which is now Muhammad Ali Boulevard. At the height of the decline, more public housing complexes were built and more businesses were closed, which continued to lead to the migration to other parts of the city that were up and coming, leaving the Russell neighborhood stripped from its former energy. As the years went on, the community continued to go downhill, and high levels of gun violence and poverty began to take over and be the new reputation for the once esteemed neighborhood. The story for Russell did shift, though, when residents who remember the good old days began having conversations with city officials to explore the opportunity to invest in the business aspect of the community with hopes of restoring the neighborhood to its prime. Recognizing its importance to the health and the vitality of the entire city, the Louisville Metro government designated the Russell neighborhood as a priority focus for concentrated efforts to counter decades of disinvestment and neglect. Beginning in 2017, with new financial contributions, both private and public, equaling almost $30 million, Louisville began the Russell revitalization efforts. The transformation of Russell investments included dispersing businesses to Black entrepreneurs, funding Black-owned community-based organizations that serve the area, and the redevelopment of the Beecher Terrace housing complex. The Russell that we see today looks completely different from the Russell that I remember growing up, yet it nostalgically mirrors the essence of Louisville's Harlem. Like Russell, many of us have experienced times that have been an emotional roller coaster. I'd like to believe that there are neighborhoods around the world that have experienced similar trials, but have never lost hope to rebuild stronger than what was remembered. Throughout our shared history, we've consistently demonstrated unwavering resilience, overcoming challenges and emerging stronger each time. Resilience isn't merely a trait. It is a testament to our collective determination to thrive despite adversity. The Russell community stands as a beacon of unity, where diverse voices harmonize to create strength. We celebrate and find unity in our differences, understanding that together we're stronger. In times of need, we extend a helping hand without fail, reinforcing that the bonds that make our community resilient. Our strength lies not just in physical support, but in inner fortitude, propelling us forward. Endurance and adaptation are defining characteristics, like a sturdy tree with deep roots. Loyalty binds us, fostering belonging and empowering us to face challenges with courage. Love is our foundation for our neighbors, shared history, and future, driving our resilience and inclusivity. Now, we must learn from the example of endurance and patience that it took to revive the Russell neighborhood. Whether you're rebuilding your community or you're rebuilding yourself, knowing that it is possible and believing that it is achievable is half the battle. Take the time to understand the necessary strategy to reach a renaissance that will not only inspire your now, but inspire generations to come. The Russell community is a shining example of a resilient community. Let us continue to embody these principles of unity, support, strength, endurance, loyalty, and love as we navigate the future together, confident that the spirit of the Russell community continues to flourish within each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dewana. Our next speaker is Clay Marshall, who will be... Cool. Yeah. That's great. You're ruining my flow. Who will be accompanied by Winnie Chung on the piano, Cherie Lanier, dancer, Pablo Zaventietti, bass, and Janice Lee on the violin. Together they form Tango with Winnie. Clay Marshall is the former technical director of the Commonwealth Theater and co-owns Bourbon Tango with Cherie. Their mission is to use dance to teach people how to connect and enjoy their lives. Please welcome Clay Marshall.
It's the beginning of March, and you see a light at the end of the tunnel. After years of hard work, paperwork, you have just opened the doors to your own business, and you're going to turn a profit your first month. That was the March we were having 4 years ago when COVID struck. It suddenly became the worst time to own a studio teaching people how to dance with a partner. We had 70 students we could not teach. Our salaries hadn't even started yet, so government aid covered about half of 1 month of our bills. I usually describe it like a Looney Tunes cartoon. That light at the end of the tunnel was a train. But this isn't a story about tragedy. We survived and came back because of our community. Students who kept their memberships going month after month. Outright donations tucked into cards of love and hope. The people who actively support you are what make your community durable. It's not made from Facebook fans, but from the people who would watch your kids in an emergency, who bring you food after the death of a loved one. It's the people who share in the poignant moments of your life. Like for us, after being shut down for a year, when our students came back. Couples in masks dancing 12 feet apart in a gym to align with some absurd rules, but it was nothing but smiles under those masks, and you know they were real. You could see them right up into the eye. Those first people who came out to dance needed it. They needed to hug, to stretch, and move together to the music. Not just for their own health, which is a whole nother TED Talk, but for dance's special kind of social glue. Doctors Frances McGlone and Susanna Walker highlight this in their neuroscience article, 4 Ways Hugs Are Good for You. See, when someone hugs you, it stimulates a type of nerve in your body called the C-tactile afferent, adorably nicknamed your cuddle nerves. These nerves release a cascade of neurochemicals, including oxytocin and serotonin. When you embrace someone, you get an immediate rush of well-being and pleasure. Your heart rate goes down. Stress and anxiety diminish, making it easier and safer to connect not just to your partner, but to everyone around you. And it gets better. Regular doses of oxytocin actually reduce your reactivity to stress. So as you practice your tango, hopefully, every week for hours, your mind adjusts to handle more oxytocin. It literally replaces your stress receptors to do so. Tango literally reduces your reactivity, your ability to feel stressed. And our students longed for that. Hugging is one thing, but tango turns that hug into a conversation. It helps us learn how to listen to each other, how to laugh through our mistakes and persist through challenges on and off the dance floor. Seeing our students back again was practically a family reunion. See, a truly resilient community is personal. It's not just about being tough. There's a softness to it, a vulnerability that absorbs adversity. The embrace of tango is like that. It accepts the space we need while still pulling everyone back together. And it feeds the conviction in our belief that the philosophy and practice of being a good dancer isn't just healthy for the individual, but it can help ease our divisions, reduce your loneliness, increase your social bonds, even, maybe, possibly, make holiday dinners less confrontational. It's in tango's blood. Robert Thompson says as much in his book, Tango, The Art History of Love. So you can trace tango's roots from Africa and Europe, but it was born in the 1880s in the working class neighborhoods and segregated ghettos of Buenos Aires, Argentina. In 30 years, just think about that, 30 years, it overcame all of that. All that racism, all that entrenched division of class and income, and it became a national treasure. Tango is a love story for a whole society. As tango embraced more dancers and musicians, its styling changed. Each orchestra was cherished for its individual sound, and you could see that in the way that people would dance differently to the different music. Famous dancers were known for their unique styles. And even the floor you danced on changed the way you moved. It has so many amazing parallels with hip-hop, but where hip-hop is about individual expression, tango is literally about embracing each other's differences. You see, the best possible dance that you can have with another person can only happen if you accept your partner, yourself, and your surroundings. Your relative heights, weights, balance, flexibility, skill level, all of that has to be embraced. That is where the magic is. Imagine for just a moment what that mindset could do for your life off the dance floor. It's a practice of connection, a practice of peace. And it's this kind of radical acceptance that helped tango survive its darkest moments. See, in 1955, the government in Argentina was overthrown, and the military dictatorship that took its place banned all public gatherings, effectively keeping tango from being danced or taught for 28 years. This was a dangerous time, where not just political dissidents, but artists and dancers were abducted without ever being heard from again. 30,000 people in total were missing. They were known as the desaparecidos, the disappeared. The dance literally went underground. It was kept alive in small, intimate family gatherings in people's basements. Tango which had been so captivating that it transcended social boundaries and captured the heart of the nation, even the world, survived these extreme situations not by force, but by love. And that, at its core, is what tango is all about. Learning to endure and overcome hardship by connecting and savoring what we have. We see that today in our classes. People who are polar opposites can not only put that aside and connect, but actually enjoy that connection. It's a true communal art form that continues to evolve and embrace the people who dance it today. The dance has become a conversation between the lead and the follow, equalizing gender roles. And many people now learn to switch and dance those opposite roles. The tango brings a whole new meaning to understanding the phrase walking in someone else's shoes. The tango isn't just a dance. It's a way of life. And that's why in 2022, we were compelled to do it all over again. We found a new location. We rebuilt our social dance offering. You may have heard these tropes: progress isn't a straight line. You know, it's easy to get caught up in your goals. But I think everyone here can understand this idea. You don't listen to a song to get to the end of it. Dancing puts that idea into practice, directly into your body and your relationships. That's my challenge to you. Start small. Just put on a song and hug someone. See where it takes you. Seeing is believing. So my partner Cherie and I would like to share our love of tango with you. And even better, we get the honor to do so to the amazing live music of Tango with Winnie. Now, just to be clear, this is not choreographed. This is unplanned. This is an improvised performance between us, a conversation between us and the musicians. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Sácale Firuta al piso hasta romper los zapatos. That was Ara Valera. That was Ara Valera, versión Francisco Canaro. Coming up, we have Cordón de Oro, versión Troilo.
We're good.
Hello. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for the claps again. Thank you. So I don't know if you noticed this from before, but I typically have a co-host.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm actually really winded. Yeah.
There was a little dance party backstage.
Yeah.
Obviously.
We should have put a camera back there.
No, literally.
It'd have been
it
really
was
cool.
entertaining. It
That
was
was
really
awesome.
cool. That was awesome. Yes.
Anyway,
Do your job now.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you to Clay and to all of our speakers to start, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Still can't
Yes.
breathe.
So yes, yeah, we'll keep it brief. So we're going to close off by talking about community resilience because we talked about community and the resilience. Community resilience.
It's
so
our theme.
It's our theme. Hopefully that you caught that. So first off, I'm going to say it is very rare for an event like TED to go on for this long. Like Jacob said, we've been doing it for 6 years, which actually is not very common.
Very impressive.
It's very impressive. Yeah, we got it.
You guys don't know that, but it is.
It's very impressive. Yes. So places like New York and Nashville have also hosted several events. So we're basically like up with Nashville and New York.
We're pretty much New York City.
We're pretty much New York City. Right. So we're doing pretty well.
Yeah. And we've had hundreds of people attend our events over the years. And along with many sponsors and volunteers, this holistic group, right? Our sponsors, our volunteers, our speakers, our everything, builds our community resilience, right? And while we have that, that gives us the momentum to keep going.
Yes.
So we hope to see you guys next year. And
I put something funny on the.
there was a
on
trick
the-
added to the last slide here, and it's
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Yeah, it's bye-bye with
Thanks,
a little
everybody.
frowny face.
We're going to talk through the sponsors as
yes,
well.
yes,
Yep.
yes. We'll
And
dismiss you all. Yeah, and bye-bye.
Yeah.
So we have we have several people to thank. Of course, our TEDx core team, and we'd like to thank the comm department, DAT program for supporting us in several different ways. Our art department, Ari Eastman and Michael Kopp for putting together this beautiful sign. Look at it; it's so good. Yes, yes. Thank you to them. Thank you to them. And the theater department for giving us a lot of support, letting us borrow the black box and many of their theater
And the
equipment.
theater.
And the theater. We appreciate that. And of course, all of the students, faculty, and staff who volunteered. Thank you so, so much. We appreciate you.
we want to thank, you can clap for that if you want.
Yeah, there you go.
We want to thank Twin Spires Remodeling, Right Mind Growth Consulting, the traveling trainer, Sophie Coffee, Alani, Dyslexics Untied Podcast, or Dyslexics United Podcast, whatever your preference is.
He's a part of it if you couldn't tell.
No, I don't know. Bellarmine SGA, One Source Discovery, Shipping Port Brewery, Super Weird Studios,
Yeah, there you go.
and Bay's Bakery.
And even more, we promised you we would thank them all individually
Yep.
later on. So we have more sponsors. We also
Thank
want
you,
to
Lucas.
thank you. We have Dirty Teas, Thunder Gust Coffee, Wild Hops Brewery, as well as our community partners. We have Dreams with Wings and the Louisville Metro Office of Resilience and Community Services. And we also want to thank one of our individual donors, Deb Bachoco. And of course, we want to send love and to commemorate our lovely Dr. Maggie Rosman and Father Isaac McDaniel, two members of our Bellarmine community and our Bellarmine family that we have lost and we miss very much. I think we should give them. Yes, thank you.
Please stick around, enjoy the reception, and talk with each other and our amazing speakers. And as always, in the spirit of Bellarmine, to remember to always explore the world and start within.
Thank you all.
Thank you.